Today we're diving into what might well be the most consequential moment for the Iraqi dinar's IQD in modern history. Massive intel drop, exchange centers now active for Iraqi dinar. What's really happening? If what we're hearing is accurate, this could change everything for those holding this currency. And not just in theory. This isn't about speculative chatter or wishful thinking. We're talking reported activations of official exchange centers, system updates, regulatory changes, and a potential shift from holding and waiting toward a real pathway for conversion. In this video, style breakdown for our YouTube audience will go step by step through the intelligence, the process, the implications, what it could mean, and most importantly, we'll separate what we know versus what remains unverified. So stay tuned all the way through, because by the end, you'll be in a much stronger position to assess your own situation. Let's start with the claim itself. Multiple sources are reporting that exchange centers across various countries are being activated for Iraqi dinar exchange. According to these reports, what is normally a very slow, niche, and informal process is now showing signs of formalization. Banks and currency exchange operations are reportedly putting up extra staff, expanding hours, updating their systems, engaging in increased communications about the IQD. One account states that certain redemption centers in the US have quietly gone live for IQDs and other currencies exchange activities. But let's look more closely at what the existing, confirmed situation is around the Iraqi dinar. The dinar has been a currency with very limited mainstream exchange possibilities outside Iraq, and many authorities have cautioned consumers that the marketplace around IQD is risky. For example, the state of Washington's Attorney General office has warned consumers that the dinars can be redeemed only in Iraq, as most of the established currency exchange houses and banking institutions cannot convert the dinar to US dollars. Washington Attorney General, that means previously, many holders were in a kind of limbo. They owned IQD, but the pathway to convert it was highly uncertain and in many cases not possible via standard banks. Now, juxtapose that with these newer reports of activation of exchange centers in multiple locations. On one hand, you have a regulatory and functional environment where conversion is limited and many institutions sidestep IQD entirely. On the other hand, you have reports of redemption centers going live and banks doing system upgrades. The question becomes, is this signaling a genuine systemic rollout or is it just isolated, unverified operations? That matters a great deal because if it is systemic, that suggests the currency may be becoming more penetrable into mainstream exchange networks. Here are some of the specific operational signals being reported: extended hours at exchange facilities, staff being called in, system updates happening, increased communications within international banking networks about processing of IQD, including updated instructions, 3 regulatory approvals being fast-tracked for IQD exchange operations. These reports are coming from persons described as banking insiders or contacts within currency exchange operations. If these operational signals are correct, it suggests that behind the scenes major institutions are quietly preparing for something larger. But note, documents publicly verifying every claim are still sparse. What would activation of exchange centers actually look like for you as a holder of IQD? In a best-case scenario, it means you'd have a legitimate, regulated channel to bring in your dinars, verify them, register the transaction, and exchange them at a rate set by official market conditions rather than purely black market or speculative dealers. That means that the once very informal conversion chain could become more formalized, and that's a big deal. But the caveat, activation does not automatically equal massive rate increase or instant payoff. It means infrastructure is enabled, the value implication is separate. Let's illustrate how the process might unfold based on what's being reported. First, verification of authenticity. Because with a currency like the dinar, counterfeit or non-standard notes are a known risk, official exchange centers would likely require checking serial numbers, security features, condition of banknotes. Second, registration and documentation for large exchanges, real money laundering safeguards, official records, thresholds for reporting. Third, the exchange itself, conducted via official channels at a rate determined by economic fundamentals, supply and demand, regulation, and perhaps treaty sovereign arrangements. If and when this happens, that marks the transition from to possible action. Now, it's important we don't overpromise. We must be realistic about expectations. The fact that systems are being set up does not guarantee that you will receive some extraordinary return or that the rate will suddenly skyrocket. Currencies don't typically go from quiet to mega payoff overnight. The activation of exchange centers is one major step, but the value behind that is driven by macroeconomic factors: how stable Iraq becomes politically, how its oil production and national economy perform, how much FX reserve it holds, how international markets treat IQD, and whether there is broad demand to swap IQD for major currencies. Let's detail some of these macroeconomic and regulatory factors. The currency's future value is tied to Iraq's stability. Things like the strength of its oil exports, the fiscal health of the government, how much debt it carries, and its foreign reserves. Also, how open its financial system is to the world, and how eager international banks are to process IQD. If the regulatory approvals for exchange centers are real, it shows at least some institutional willingness. But willingness doesn't automatically translate to immediate high rates. Market confidence must ramp up, and the volume of conversion must scale. Next, let's discuss the regional global footprint of these reported activations. According to the reports, the U.S. is a focal point. Large metropolitan areas with international banking and currency exchange presence, e.g., New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, are said to be preparing centers for the IQD. Similar activities are allegedly being seen in major European finance hubs, London, Frankfurt, Zurich, and in Middle East hubs, Dubai, Kuwait, that serve as bridges between East and West. If true, this is significant, not simply one country or one small operation, but many locations. But we must treat this as reported intel, not yet universally verified. Why is this global footprint important? Because to really integrate a currency like IQD into global conversion pipelines, you need a multi-region infrastructure, banks in major FX hubs, correspondent banking relationships, currency exchange networks, liquidity pools. If exchange centers activate in key hubs, that suggests a systemic rollout rather than a niche operation. It expands the access for holders around the world. But again, a global footprint doesn't guarantee rate movement. It just lowers the barrier for conversion. Timing is also being talked about. The reports suggest we're in phase 1 right now: system setup, staff training, small internal testing of systems at these centers. Phase 2 would be limited testing with small transactions, perhaps to validate systems. Phase 3 would be full public activation where holders can bring in dinars for exchange. Some projections suggest this might happen by early November 2025 if all goes smoothly with regulatory approval and system readiness. But these are projections, not guarantees. Delays, regulatory hurdles, liquidity issues, geopolitical shocks could push timelines out. So what does this mean for you as a dinar holder today? The key takeaway is prepare, but don't base your livelihood on a guarantee yet. Make sure your dinars are in good condition. You can account for acquisition, when you bought, where, keep any paperwork, store them securely. Understand that even once exchange centers open, there may be queues, appointment systems, delays. The infrastructure may be ready, but the volume may surge slower. Also, study fees and tax implications. Large currency transactions often trigger regulatory oversight. If you convert, you'll likely face questions or obligations about source, intent, tax, so patience and documentation are crucial. Let's also cover risks and cautionary notes. Even if the activation is real, there are still reasons to be cautious. Authorities in various U.S. states have flagged dinar investments as high risk, noting that many holders may never find a viable exchange. The fact that exchange centers may be activating doesn't eliminate the possibility of scams, false operators, or over-optimistic promises of rate increases in days. Always verify the credentials of an exchange center. Ask, is it regulated? Is the conversion being done by a bank or just a broker? Is there transparency in rate, fees, timing? One of the big questions on everyone's mind: will the rate go up significantly once these exchange centers are active? The honest answer may be, but there are no guarantees. Infrastructure activation is necessary, but not sufficient for rate increase. What drives currency value is supply vs demand, macro fundamentals, market sentiment, foreign investment flows, regulatory environment. So activation is a positive signal, but not an automatic trigger for a windfall. For example, if many holders rush to convert but there is limited demand on the other side, banks or currency markets that want IQD, then the rate might not move dramatically or could even drop due to oversupply. Another question: what happens if I miss out or can't access an exchange center right away? The scenario might play out where high volume holders or large investors get priority. There might be appointment systems or queues. Centers may operate extended hours but might still be overwhelmed initially. If you wait, you may still convert, but perhaps at a less favorable time or rate. So being aware, ready, and monitoring the situation is wise. That said, rushing into something blindly without verification could expose you to fraud. Also consider the tax and regulatory side. Large currency exchanges can trigger taxable events in many jurisdictions. If you convert a large amount of dinars and receive significant value, you might owe capital gains tax or other tax liabilities depending on your country. Documentation of how you obtained the dinars, their condition, their authenticity, and the proof of conversion will matter. If you cannot produce good records, you might face scrutiny. So as you anticipate activation of exchange centers, consider consulting a tax professional with experience in foreign currency conversions. Let's widen the lens to what this means for global finance should things go as reported. If exchange centers for IQD truly become active on a global scale, it signals that international banking and currency networks are more comfortable with Iraq's currency than before. That could reflect improved economic stability in Iraq or a strategic move to integrate Iraq more into the global financial system. For investors, that means IQD may gradually shift from niche speculation territory into something closer to mainstream, but still with caveats. This kind of transition often takes time, so the process from activation to full scalable conversions at mid-range rates might be months or even years. And as we wrap this up for our viewers on this YouTube-style segment, yes, what we're seeing might be the most tangible development in the dinar space in years. The fact that reports are flooding in about exchange centers being activated, system updates occurring, regulatory communication happening is significant. But remember, activation windfall equals possibility. For you, that means readiness is key. Document your holdings, verify authenticity, stay secure. Monitor the announcements of banks or regulated centers. Set realistic expectations. This could be the beginning of something large, but liquidity, rate, timing, access all matter. If you found this update valuable, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we'll keep tracking this story as developments unfold. In the world of currency and international finance, information really is power. Stay wise, stay patient, and importantly, stay realistic. Until next time.